Welcome to my channel GIC. Subscribe for daily IELTS Listening Test.
Part 1.
You will hear a conversation between a senior librarian and a woman interested in working at the library. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 7. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 7.
I'm interested in doing some work for the library. Are you the person to speak to?
Yes. Right. Well, what sort of work are you interested in?
Well, I've just come to live here in Australia. I don't want a full-time job until my children have settled down, but I really need to get out of the house a bit. And I heard you need voluntary workers for various projects.
Right.
But I don't know if I have the right skills.
Well, we do provide training.
Oh!
We always include an orientation to the library, together with emergency procedures. That's fire regulations, emergency exits, first aid so you can cope with accidents or sudden illness. Things like that which are necessary for anyone who's working with the public. Then we give specialist training for particular projects, like using our database system.
I do have quite good computer skills, in fact.
Oh, great.
Is there any sort of dress requirement?
Well, all staff have to wear a name badge, so they can be identified if they go outside the staff-only areas. But apart from that, there aren't many regulations. We ask you to sign in and sign out for insurance purposes, but that's all. How about transport? Do you live locally?
Well, not too far away. I'm at Porpoise Beach. My husband needs a car during the day, but it's only about 20 minutes on the bus.
In fact, we can reimburse part of your travel expenses in that case.
Oh! Would that be the same if I came by car?
No, because parking is such a problem here. One thing we are looking for, though, is someone who can drive a minibus.
No problem. So, do the projects involve going outside the library?
Some, yes, but not all. We've just finished one which involved working with photographs taken of the area 50 or 100 years ago. It basically involved what we call encapsulation.
Putting them in some sort of covers to keep them safe?
Exactly. It's time-consuming work, and we were very grateful to have help with it. Then, sometime next year, we're hoping to begin working on an initiative involving the sorting and labelling of objects relating to local history. We'll be needing help with the cataloguing.
Well, I'd definitely be interested. How about at present?
Well, we have a small team who work to support those who are unable to read.
Working with the blind?
Yes, or other groups who have reading difficulties. We provide volunteers with equipment so that they can take books home with them and read them aloud onto CDs. We're gradually building up a collection that can be lent to those who need them.
I can see it would be useful, but I'd really like to do some sort of work where I can get the chance to meet people. How about reading stories to children?
That's done by our regular staff. But we do have another project. It's a very long-established scheme which involves helping those who are unable to have direct access to the library.
Oh, I noticed someone with a trolley of books when I was at the hospital last week. That sort of thing.
That would have been one of ours, yes. It's one of our most popular services. Lots of people who wouldn't dream of going to the library normally, when they're at home, borrow a book when the trolley comes round the ward.
I can imagine. Yes, I'd definitely be interested in that. Right, so how do I enrol?
Well, we do ask all volunteers to commit themselves to a regular period each week.
I could probably do 5 or 6 hours.
Oh, be careful not to take on too much. But we do need someone for a couple of afternoons from 2 to 4, so 4 hours altogether.
That sounds fine.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 8 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 8 to 10.
Right, so here's the application form. It asks the usual questions, name and address and telephone number. You also need to fill in details of who we should get in touch with in case of any accident or problem like that. We do need to have that filled in. And there's a space for date of birth, but that's only if you're over 75, so we won't worry about that.
No. Oh, it asks for qualifications. Do I need to provide certificates?
They're not necessary. We'll need the names of 2 referees, not relatives or family members, obviously. What else? Signature of parent or guardian. That won't be necessary, as I assume you're over 18.
Yes. Oh, what's this? It says civil conviction check.
That's a document we have to provide by law for those working on projects involving children, so we won't need it in your case. But you will need to sign this separate document. That's a copy of commitment. It's basically an agreement to work according to the library guidelines. So, if you'd like to fill this all in, you can do it here or take it home, whichever you prefer.
I'll take it home if that's okay. Right, well, thank you for your time.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Part 2. Part 2.
You will hear a recorded message giving information about an area where tourists can visit to taste local food. First, you will have some time to look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen carefully to the first part of the message and answer questions 11 to 13.
Welcome to the tourist information line for the Valley Food Trail. Here you will find many local food products for you to sample and buy. It is possible for you to spend as much or as little time as you want, but I suggest that you allow a full day for touring this area. Of course, there are many half-day tours available for those of you short on time. Now, it's quite a large area and stretches from Brookville to Ford Hill. For those of you unfamiliar with the area, that means that it is 10 kilometres to 35 kilometres from the city centre, or by car 15 minutes to the closest point, continuing to 55 minutes at its furthest point from the CBD. Of course, apart from food, there are many other places of interest in this area, including cafes and restaurants and galleries and studios. But I wouldn't recommend you go here to see parks and gardens. The other information lines will give you specific information related to these particular attractions.
Before the final part of the message, look at questions 14 to 20. Now answer questions 14 to 20.
But let's go back to food. If we begin in Brookville and head north towards Upper Valley in a clockwise direction, passing West Valley on West Road, we cross over Coast Road to come to our first place of interest, Magic Coffee. This is not to be confused with the Coffee House, situated opposite on the other side of the valley on the railway line. Magic Coffee is next to the Chocolate Company, which is on the corner. Just past the ice cream shop on the corner of John Street is the fresh produce shop. A little further north, we have reached Ford Hill, where we can start our drive southwards along Great Northern Highway following the railway line. First, we come to the organic market near the corner of Memorial Avenue, and then to Olive Farm opposite Olive Road. Just before we come to the next street crossing, we see the Honey Pot, which is practically opposite the coffee house. There is another chocolate company which sells nougat as well, just nearby. Following the railway line along Great Northern Highway, we return back to Brookville. Now, as I have said previously, if you only have a few hours to spare, there are several places that you shouldn't miss. The two chocolate places make equally nice chocolate, but the factory has the added bonus of nougat, unlike the company. Of course, everyone loves ice cream, especially unusual flavours such as coffee and nougat, so the ice creamery is definitely worth a visit. And while the coffee house sells expertly made hot drinks, including hot chocolate, I think your time would be better spent sampling the many products on offer at the organic market. Well, I hope you enjoy your time visiting the Valley Food Trail and enjoy all the wonderful local foods on offer.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Part 3.
You are going to hear a conversation on rivers. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen to the tape and answer the questions.
21 to 25.
Please tell me about the current state of the Amazon.
We have increased deforestation, increased human population relating to deforestation, and a role of fire in the Amazon on a scale that's never been seen in history. At the same time, you can see progress in trying to counter that negative trend.
How do you see this?
We see this in the creation of national parks and indigenous areas, and efforts to fund sustainable development activities for locals. We see both good and the bad, and it's going to be a race to finish.
I understand that you started the Minimum Critical Size of Ecosystems project. Could you tell me about it?
A number of years ago, it became apparent that those practicing conservationists didn't have the scientific information available to properly design a conservation area.
They didn't know how big it had to be, right?
People were learning that as forests fragment, the fragments begin to shed species after they become isolated, so they end up becoming poor examples of what they had been. This relates to the size of the fragment.
Do people still study this?
Yes, there is a rich subfield of conservation biology that looks at the efforts of fragmentation. One of the consequences is a general policy response to set up protected areas that are fairly large, something on the order of 1,000 square kilometres.
Now look at questions 26 to 30. As the talk continues, answer questions 26 to 30.
Can you talk a little bit more about the forest fragmentation?
As habitats are destroyed, they are accompanied by habitat fragmentation. So when 50% of a forest is lost, the remaining 50% being is not one large block, but smaller pieces, which makes the conservation problem even worse than saying that 50% has been lost.
And this affects not just forest, but species diversity, correct?
In terms of species loss, we can't give you precise numbers about how many species are lost because of these fragmented landscapes, but we're beginning to get close to where we can make that estimation. And so one of the policy responses to all of this, beyond just trying to create large protected areas, is to try and reconnect the fragments.
You've been active in many projects studying the Amazon region over the years. Can you tell us about that process of understanding the Amazon?
When people first started looking at conservation priorities, there was not much information about the geography of plant and animal species. One of the first clues was an analysis done in 1969. This looked at bird species and found geographic clusters of species which occurred nowhere else. And those are priority areas for conservation.
Was this when people began prioritising refuges?
Yes, it was the first time that someone looked basin-wide at priorities, giving priority to so-called refugean areas.
Was this when the new trend to use Geographic Information Systems, or a GIS, started?
That was in 1990 after we worked out a whole set of biological and conservational priorities and produced a big map using GIS.
What are some of the things that GIS does?
Well, there are several advantages of using a geographic information system. First, you can continually update the system so that it's now a constantly changing picture. You can actually watch changes. Then you can include large amounts of data, including information about the vectors of development. Roads, railroads, pipelines, hydroelectric projects, etc. And finally, because it is accessible on the internet, it makes this information available to anyone who's interested.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
4.
Part 4. About the installation of a telephone. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
I buy a new telephone. You read the instructions and I will install it, right?
Sure. First, push the battery door outward to open and then insert 2 batteries, size AAA. Make sure they are following the polarity directions indicated inside the battery compartment. Finally, close the battery door. This is the first step. Now, let's come to the second step, adjusting time. Press time key first, then press MRC key more than 1 second to enter the time, adjusting state. Have you seen the second digit flashing now?
Yes, it is flashing now.
So let's go on. Press MRC key again to adjust minute, hour, date. Have you finished?
Yes, all the digits have been flashing successively.
Now it comes to adjusting alarm. Press alarm key to enter the 3 states of A1, A2, A3. Pay attention to the 2 keys in the corner on the right hand. They are the keys to lock and unlock the alarm respectively. Press MRC key to enter the adjusting procedure. And have you seen the second digit begin to flash?
Yes, I think I should repeat this action, yes?
Yes. Press MRC key again to adjust minute and the on-off of the alarm. By now you own a phone at the same time with a clock that can wake you up in the early morning.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe GIC IELTS.